The War Council chamber on board the Valkyrie flagship Eternal Vigilance hummed with the nervous energy of a dozen alien species, all trying very hard not to look directly at the human delegation. I am Commander Thralk of the Vektari Supremacy, third claw of the Galactic Defense Coalition, and I have lived through 47 standard cycles of military service. I have seen empires crumble, watched stars collapse, and negotiated treaties with species so bizarre they communicated through controlled flatulence. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for humanity. They sat at the far end of the conference table, 3 of them, looking remarkably bored. The one on the left, a woman named Captain Victoria Hayes, was actually filing her nails. We were discussing the imminent destruction of 17 populated systems, and she was concerned about her personal grooming. So, let me get this straight, she said without looking up from her fingers, her voice dripping with the kind of casual disinterest usually reserved for discussing weather patterns. You want us to what exactly? Hold your hands while you fight the Krell swarm. My throat sacs inflated with indignation, a physical response I could not control. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke to the coalition leadership like that. Nobody except humans, apparently. Admiral Corvin, the Zetherian representative, whose species had been fighting wars since before Earth had evolved multicellular life, leaned forward with all 6 of his arms splayed in a gesture of diplomatic patience. Captain Hayes, perhaps you misunderstand the severity of our situation. The Krell already consumed the Outer Rim territories. 12 billion souls. Gone. Their swarm fleet numbers in the millions. We are not asking for you to hold anyone's hands. We are asking for reinforcements. The human in the middle, Colonel James Patterson, actually laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the kind of laugh that made my scales itch. Reinforcements, he repeated, like he was tasting the word and finding it bitter. You have 40,000 warships in this coalition, the combined military might of 17 species, weapons platforms that can crack planets, shield technology that could withstand a supernova, and you want reinforcements. The humans agreed to join the coalition, I interjected, trying to keep my voice steady. The Mutual Defense Pact was ratified by your own government. We are calling upon that agreement. The third human, Lieutenant Daniel Cooper, stopped scrolling through his datapad and looked up at me for the first time. His eyes were an unsettling shade of blue like the sky on my homeworld just before a hailing storm. Oh, we'll honor the agreement, he said quietly. Too quietly. But let's be clear about something. You didn't invite us to join because you valued human military prowess. You invited us because you thought we'd make good cannon fodder. Aggressive, numerous, disposable. Isn't that right, Commander Thralk? My throat sacs deflated entirely. How did he know? The internal coalition memos were supposed to be classified at the highest level. Captain Hayes smiled then. It was not a warm smile. Did you really think your encryption was that good? We had your entire communication network mapped within 6 hours of first contact. 6 hours. Admiral Corvin's chromatic skin flushed from blue to an alarmed shade of purple. That is impossible. Our quantum encryption protocols, adorable, Hayes interrupted. Really. Very cute. Like watching children play with alphabet blocks. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien protests, clicks, whistles, and subsonic rumbles of outrage. I slammed my primary appendage on the table, producing a sound that cut through the noise like a blade. Enough, I roared. The Krell swarm will be here in less than 72 hours. They have already breached the Talvex system. If we do not coordinate our defense, we will all be consumed. Our species included humans. Colonel Patterson leaned back in his chair, somehow making the simple gesture look threatening. Commander, do you know what humanity's biggest export is? Before we joined your little coalition, I blinked my nictitating membranes in confusion. I failed to see the relevance. Humor me, he said. Take a guess. Technology, ventured Corvin. Culture, offered Specialist Quabarom, the hive mind representative whose voice always sounded like 1,000 whispers speaking in unison. Violence, Patterson said flatly. Our biggest export is violence. For 500 years, ever since we figured out faster-than-light travel, do you know what we have been doing? We have been fighting. Not each other, not anymore. We got tired of that around the time we invented fusion power and nearly glassed our own planet. No, we have been fighting everything else. Pirates, Warlords, rogue AI collectives, dimensional parasites, that one species that tried to patent oxygen. We have been the galaxy's unofficial cleanup crew, dealing with every nasty little problem that crops up in the dark spaces between your nice, civilized systems. Hayes picked up the thread without missing a beat. You know the Sarlacc Corsairs. That pirate fleet that terrorized the trade lanes for 60 years until they mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago. Several delegates nodded slowly. That was us, she said. One frigate, the Prometheus. Took us about 8 days. We would have done it faster, but we stopped for coffee. The Omega Collective, Cooper added, still scrolling through his datapad. The hive intelligence that was consuming mining colonies in the Bracken sector. You all thought they got wiped out by some kind of virus. He looked up. That storm sky gaze fixing on each of us in turn. That was us. 12 Marines. They went in with cutting torches and attitude, and they came out 3 weeks later. Do you know what they left behind? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The collective's entire central processing hub, 17 miles of organic computer tissue, reduced to ash. My mouth went dry. The Omega Collective incident had been studied at the War Academy for months. The leading theory was that they had been infected by some kind of bioweapon, possibly of their own making. The idea that 12 soldiers could have... No, it was impossible. Except, looking at the absolutely serious expressions on these humans' faces, I was beginning to suspect that impossible was not a word in their vocabulary. You are claiming, Admiral Corvin said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, that humanity has been conducting unsanctioned military operations throughout coalition space for years, without authorization, without oversight. Unsanctioned? Patterson raised an eyebrow. Admiral, did you authorize the Krell to start eating entire civilizations? Did you authorize the Blood Reavers to start selling children on the black market? Did you authorize the Phantom Syndicate to start trafficking in weaponized plagues? He stood up, and somehow the man who was at least 3 feet shorter than most of the beings in the room suddenly dominated the space. No, he continued, his voice hard as tungsten. You sat in your safe systems with your mighty fleets and your defense platforms, and you did nothing. Because doing something would have been messy, complicated, politically inconvenient. So humanity did it for you. We have been your garbage collectors, your pest control, your dirty little secret. And now that something big and scary has shown up at your doorstep, now you want to pretend we are just another member species who needs protecting. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own circulatory system pumping, the rhythmic click hiss of my respiratory vents. Specialist Qualarame spoke, their 1,000 voices unusually subdued. If what you claim is true, why has humanity not said anything before? Why the secrecy? Hayes smiled again, and this time there was something almost sad in it. Because you needed to believe you were safe. You needed to believe your coalition was strong. Your militaries were competent. Your civilizations were secure. And they were, because we made them that way. We have been operating in the shadows, dealing with the monsters, so you could sleep at night. But the Krell, I managed to say, my voice sounding weak even to my own audio receptors. The Krell are not some pirate fleet or rogue AI, they are a civilization-level threat. Their swarm fleets, currently positioned in the Talvek system with approximately 4.2 million combat vessels, ranging from drone fighters to dreadnought-class motherships. Cooper interrupted, reading from his datapad. Total estimated biomass, 18 trillion individual organisms. Hive consciousness distributed across approximately 40,000 queen nodes. They consume organic matter at a rate of 6 billion tons per standard day, and they reproduce exponentially when fed. Yeah, we know. We have been tracking them for about 6 months. The chamber exploded again. But this time it was not in protest. It was in panic. 6 months. I demanded, you have known about this threat for 6 months, and you said nothing. We said plenty. Patterson shot back. We sent 14 separate intelligence reports to Coalition Command. 14. Every single one was marked as low priority and filed away. Your own analysts concluded that the Krell were not an immediate threat, and that they would likely turn back once they encountered organized resistance. His expression could have cut steel. Your analysts were wrong. Congratulations. Admiral Corvin had gone from purple to a sickly gray color. What do you want? Why are you telling us this now? Hayes stood, joining her colleague, because the time for secrets is over. The Krell are coming, and this fight is going to be ugly. Uglier than anything the Coalition has faced. You need to understand exactly what you are dealing with, both in terms of the enemy and in terms of your allies. She tapped a command into her wrist console, and the hollow display at the center of the table flickered to life. A tactical map of Coalition space appeared, with the Krell swarm marked as a massive red cloud currently engulfing the Talvek system. It was spreading like cancer, tendrils of red creeping toward populated worlds. According to our projections, Cooper said, taking over the presentation, the Krell will hit the Fortuna system in 68 hours. That is where your main defense fleet is currently gathering. 40,000 ships. Like you said, very impressive. The map zoomed in, showing the Fortuna system in detail. Blue markers represented Coalition forces arranged in a classic defensive formation around the primary inhabited planet. Here is what is going to happen, Cooper continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. The Krell are going to arrive in force, not their entire fleet. Probably about 20%, 800,000 vessels, give or take. They will engage your defensive perimeter here, here, and here. Red markers appeared on the display showing predicted attack vectors. Your forces will hold for approximately 4 hours, maybe 5 if everyone does their job perfectly, which they will not. The Krell will overwhelm your point defenses through sheer numbers, break through your shield wall, and then swarm your capital ships. Based on their observed tactics, they will focus on disabling engines first, then weapons, then life support. They will not destroy your ships, they will capture them, and then they will consume the crews. Slowly, several delegates made sounds of distress. One of the smaller species, a Pixith observer whose name I could never properly pronounce, actually vomited into a nearby waste receptacle. Your casualty projections are? Admiral Corvin asked quietly. Total, Hayes said simply. 40,000 ships, gone. 1.2 million crew members, dead. And the Krell will have gained enough biomass to reproduce their losses 3 times over and continue their advance. I felt my legs growing weak. Then what do you propose? If the Coalition forces cannot hold, what can humanity possibly do? Patterson smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted prey. Commander Threk, you asked us to be reinforcements. You asked us to support your defensive fleet. But here is the thing about humans. We do not really do defense. We are not great at sitting still and waiting for the enemy to come to us. We tend to get bored, restless, cranky. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. So here is what is actually going to happen. You are going to take your 40,000 ships, and you are going to do exactly what we tell you to do when we tell you to do it. No arguments, no committee meetings, no consensus building. You are going to follow orders. Our orders. Admiral Corvin's chromatic skin was cycling through colors so fast it was making my eyes hurt. That is, you cannot possibly expect the Coalition to simply hand over command to the people who have been keeping you alive for the last 500 years, Hayes interrupted. Yes, we do expect exactly that, because the alternative is extinction, and frankly, Admiral, we have grown rather attached to some of you. She looked directly at me and I saw something in her eyes that I had not noticed before. It was not cruelty. It was not arrogance. It was exhaustion. Deep, bone-weary exhaustion. We are tired, Commander Threlk, she said softly. We are so very tired of fighting, of killing, of cleaning up messes that we did not make. But we are good at it. Better than anyone else in this galaxy. And if there is even a chance that we can stop the Krell, that we can save billions of lives, then we will do it. But we will do it our way. The chamber was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of prey animals realizing that the thing they thought was a fellow herbivore was actually an apex predator that had been politely pretending not to be hungry. What do you need? I heard myself ask. Patterson's smile widened. Oh, Commander, we thought you would never ask. He gestured to Cooper, who tapped a few commands into his datapad. The tactical display shifted, showing a completely different formation. Instead of the defensive wall around Fortuna, the Coalition ships were spread out in small clusters, scattered across multiple systems. First, Patterson said, we need you to split your fleet. I know, it goes against every tactical doctrine you have ever learned. Do it anyway. 20 groups of 2,000 ships, Spread them out across these systems here. Markers appeared on the display highlighting seemingly random locations throughout Coalition space. Second, we need complete access to your sensor networks, your communication relays, and your defense platforms. All of them. No restrictions, no oversight. We need to be able to see everything and talk to tech. Admiral Corvin looked like he was about to have a cardiovascular event. That would give you complete control over Coalition infrastructure. If you wanted to, you could shut down our entire civilization. Yes. Hayes agreed. We could. We will not, obviously, but we could. Trust is fun, is not it? Third, Cooper continued, ignoring the Admiral's distress, we need you to evacuate Fortuna. Everyone, every civilian, every non-essential personnel, everyone, you have 68 hours, start now. Evacuate. I repeated, my mind reeling. Fortuna has a population of 8 billion. There is no way we can evacuate that many beings in 67 hours and 53 minutes now, Cooper said, checking his chronometer. Better get started. You cannot be serious. Specialist Quillarm said, their 1,000 voices rising in pitch with stress. Even if we mobilized every transport in the sector, we could not possibly. You have 214,000 registered transport vessels within 6 jumps of Fortuna, Hayes interrupted, plus another 300,000 private craft that can be requisitioned under emergency protocols. Start with the children and the elderly. Work your way through the rest. You will be surprised what people can accomplish when properly motivated. She paused, then added, and when they know their alternative is being eaten alive by a hive mind swarm. Patterson clapped his hands together, the sharp sound making several delegates flinch. Right, so, splitting the fleet, access to infrastructure, evacuating Fortuna, those are your homework assignments. Get started immediately. Oh, and one more thing. The most important thing, really. He walked around the table, moving with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing you are the most dangerous thing in the room. He stopped directly in front of me, looking up at my much larger frame without a trace of intimidation. You are going to leak information to the Krell, he said. I blinked, all 6 of my eyes in sequence. I am going to what? Leak information. False information. To be specific. You are going to make it look like your communication security is not quite as good as it should be, and you are going to let the Krell intercept some very interesting data about Coalition ship movements, defensive capabilities, and resource stockpiles. Why? I managed to croak. Would we do that? Patterson's grin was absolutely feral. Because, Commander. The best way to kill a predator is to make it think it is hunting you right up until the moment it realizes it is actually walking into a trap. Before I could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights activated, bathing the chamber in rotating red illumination. A holographic communication window appeared, showing the face of our sensor officer, a young Vecthari, whose scales were still showing juvenile patterns. Commander Threlk, he said, his voice cracking with panic, we are detecting a massive spatial distortion in the Talavac system. A Krell, sir. They are moving. They are moving faster than we predicted. Estimated arrival at Fortuna 48 hours. I repeat, 48 hours. The chamber erupted once again, but this time I barely heard it. 48 hours. We had just lost 20 hours. The evacuation timeline was now completely impossible. I looked at the humans, expecting to see fear or at least concern. Instead, Hayes was checking her nails again, Cooper was typing on his datapad, and Patterson was smiling, actually smiling. Well, Patterson said cheerfully, looks like we are going to have to move up our schedule. Commander Threlk, I am going to need you to get every Coalition captain on a secure channel in the next 10 minutes. We have some orders to give. He turned to leave, the other humans following. Wait, I called out. What about you? What will humanity be doing while the Coalition follows your instructions? Patterson paused at the doorway and looked back at me over his shoulder. Us? He said. Oh, we are going hunting. The Krell think they are the apex predators in this galaxy. They think they can just show up and consume everything in their path without consequence. His expression went cold, and for the first time I understood why the monsters in the dark feared humanity. We are going to teach them otherwise. And then they were gone, leaving behind a chamber full of terrified aliens, and the growing realization that we had been living in a very different galaxy than we thought. We had been children playing at war, protected by forces we did not even know existed, fighting battles that were already won before we knew they had started. The Krell were coming, but they had no idea what they were about to face. They thought they were hunting us. They were wrong. We were not the prey. We had never been the prey. We were the backup. And the humans? The humans were the ones who had been holding the line this entire time, waiting patiently for the day when the galaxy would finally need to see what they were truly capable of. That day had arrived, and I had the distinct feeling that the universe was about to learn a very hard lesson about exactly why you should never ever corner a human. 47 hours and counting. I had not slept since the emergency council meeting. None of us had. The eternal vigilance was a hive of activity, every corridor packed with personnel rushing to execute the impossible task the humans had assigned us. The evacuation of Fortuna was proceeding faster than anyone had predicted, but it was still not fast enough, not nearly fast enough. My command deck was chaos incarnate. Holographic displays showed fleet movements across 17 systems. Evacuation progress reports scrolling past faster than I could process them, and communication channels lighting up with questions, complaints, and barely suppressed panic from coalition captains who could not understand why they were being ordered to split up their forces in the face of an overwhelming enemy. I could not explain it to them because I did not understand it myself. "Commander," my communications officer called out, her voice tight with stress, "we have Captain Vorsh of the Starbreaker on priority channel. He is refusing to move his battle group to the designated coordinates. He says it is tactically insane." I closed my eyes, feeling a headache building behind my optical nerves.
Captain Vorsh.
Of course it was Vorsh. The Chromath warrior had been leading fleets since before I was spawned, and he had exactly zero patience for what he considered foolishness. "Put him through," I said, resigning myself to another argument. The holographic display shifted, showing the scarred face of Captain Vorsh. His species resembled what humans called crocodiles. If crocodiles were 8 feet tall, walked upright, and had a disposition that actual crocodiles looked cuddly by comparison. "Threk," he growled without preamble, "I have received your orders. I am ignoring them. My battle group will remain in formation at Fortuna with the main fleet. We will not scatter like frightened prey animals because some human whelps told us to." Before I could respond, a new voice cut into the channel, female, calm, and carrying an undercurrent of barely controlled violence that made my scales itch. "Captain Vorsh, this is Captain Victoria Hayes of the Terran Defense Initiative. I understand you have concerns about your orders." Vorsh's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I do not take orders from humans. You are barely 100 years into space travel. My people were building star fortresses when your ancestors were still figuring out fire." "Fascinating," Hayes replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It was not a pleasant smile. "Tell me, Captain, how many of those star fortresses still exist?" The Chromath captain's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding over the audio pickup. "The Scourge Wars destroyed most of our infrastructure. That was 4,000 years ago. It is not relevant." "The Scourge," Hayes interrupted. "Right. The sentient plague that nearly wiped out the Chromath civilization. Reduced your population from 200 billion to less than 4 million in the span of a decade. Terrible tragedy. My condolences." She paused, and when she spoke again her voice had gone deadly quiet. "Would you like to know what happened to the Scourge, Captain? After they finished with your worlds and moved on to infect the rest of the galaxy." Vorsh said nothing, but his spinal crest had begun to rise, a sign of agitation. "Nothing happened to them," Hayes continued, "because they never left your space. They tried to spread, encountered something that scared them so badly they retreated back to the Chromath home system, and then they just vanished. Gone. Every trace. Your people celebrated it as divine intervention." The captain's crest was fully extended now. "How do you know this?" "Those records are classified at the highest level. They are stored in quantum vaults that are supposed to be impenetrable." "They were impenetrable," Hayes said, "to everyone except us. Do you want to know what really happened to the Scourge, Captain Vorsh? Do you want to know why they retreated, why they vanished?" Silence on the channel. Every being on my command deck had stopped what they were doing to listen. "It was us," Hayes said simply. "Humanity. This was about 300 years ago, shortly after we developed our first working FTL drive. We detected the Scourge moving through your space, analyzed their structure, and realized what they were. A weapon. An engineered bioweapon, probably created by the Vec hegemony during the consolidation wars that had gone rogue and developed sentience. My breath caught. The Vec hegemony. They had collapsed 5,000 years ago, but during their reign they had been the most technologically advanced civilization in known space. The idea that they had created the Scourge as a weapon was not new, but it had never been proven. We could not let them spread, Hayes continued. So we did not. 12 human ships entered Chromath space. The Scourge attacked them. All 12 ships were infected within hours. The captains of those ships, knowing they were already dead, deliberately flew into the Scourge's central mass and detonated their fusion cores. The explosion vaporized approximately 40% of the Scourge's total biomass. The rest we hunted down over the next 6 months. She let that sink in for a moment. 12 ships, Captain. 12 crews. 4,000 men and women who flew into a sentient plague because they knew someone had to. They saved your species. They saved a dozen other species in the sector. And then they died. And we never told anyone because we figured you all had enough to worry about without knowing how close you came to complete extinction. Captain Vorsh had gone completely still. His crest had lowered, a sign of submission in his species. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Why? Why would humans do that? We had never even met. Your species had no alliance with ours, no treaty, no obligation, because it needed doing, Hayes said quietly. And because we could. That is what we do, Captain. We handle the problems that everyone else is too scared, too civilized, or too politically constrained to deal with. We have been doing it for centuries. The Surlik Corsairs, the Omega Collective, the Blood Reavers, the Phantom Syndicate, the Scourge, and about 100 other nightmares that you never even knew existed because we made sure they never got close enough for you to worry about. She paused, then added, Now the Krell are coming, and we are going to stop them, the same way we have stopped every other threat, by being meaner, nastier, and more terrifyingly creative than they are, but we cannot do it if you will not follow orders. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to move your battle group to the designated coordinates. You are going to do it in the next 30 minutes. And you are going to trust that we know what we are doing, because if you do not, 8 billion beings on Fortuna are going to die, and that death will be on you. The channel went silent. I watched Captain Vorpish, seeing the internal struggle playing out across his reptilian features. Pride warring with pragmatism. Ego battling against the cold mathematics of survival. Finally, he inclined his head in a gesture of acceptance. My battle group will comply with the orders, but Hayes, if this plan of yours fails, if those 8 billion die because we were not there to defend them, I will hunt you across the galaxy. If we fail, Hayes replied, you will not need to hunt me. I will be dead. We all will be. Now move your ships, Captain. Time is wasted. The channel closed. My command deck remained silent for several long seconds before erupting in a flurry of renewed activity. I noticed that several of my officers were working with considerably more urgency than before. The humans' words had affected them. They had affected me. Commander Thralic. A new voice called out, and I turned to see Lieutenant Daniel Cooper standing at the entrance to my command deck. I had not heard him approach. How did humans move so quietly? Lieutenant, I acknowledged. Your colleague was quite persuasive. Captain Vorsh is complying. Cooper nodded, unsurprised. Hayes has a gift for motivation. Listen, I need to show you something. Can you spare a few minutes? Given that my entire command structure was currently executing orders I barely understood, I supposed a few minutes would not hurt. I gestured for him to lead the way, and we left the command deck moving through the corridors of my ship. As we walked, I noticed something odd. The few crew members we passed were not giving Cooper the wary, slightly fearful looks that most species reserved for humans. Instead, they were nodding respectfully, some even offering brief salutes. When had that started? Cooper led me to one of the observation decks, a small chamber with transparent aluminum walls offering a view of the space around us. The evacuation fleet stretched out in all directions, thousands of ships ferrying refugees away from Fortuna. It was actually beautiful in a terrifying sort of way. Do you know what the biggest difference is between humans and the rest of the coalition species? Cooper asked suddenly. I considered the question. Aggression? Tactical creativity? Your apparent immunity to reasonable fear responses? He smiled slightly. All true. But no. The biggest difference is this. When you see a problem, you try to manage it. Contain it. Minimize the damage. When we see a problem, we try to solve it permanently. He pointed out at the evacuation fleet. You are evacuating Fortuna because we told you to. You are splitting your fleet because we told you to. But you are doing it all reluctantly, convinced that it is wrong, that there must be a better way. You are managing the crisis. His hand swept across the viewport, encompassing all of space. We are solving it. Before I could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring again. Different alarms this time, not the evacuation warnings. Combat alerts. Commander, threat to the command deck immediately. My communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. We have detected Krell scouts. Multiple contacts. They are probing our sensor perimeter. Cooper's expression did not change. If anything, he looked satisfied. Right on schedule. Come on, Commander. The show is about to start. We raced back to the command deck, where controlled chaos had transformed into barely suppressed panic. The holographic display showed dozens of red markers appearing at the edge of our sensor range, moving in erratic patterns. 37 contacts, my tactical officer reported. Scout-class vessels. They are not engaging, just scanning our positions and jumping out before we can target them. Admiral Corvin's face appeared on the priority channel, his chromatic skin cycling through anxious colors. Threk, scouts are mapping our defenses. Once they report back to the main swarm, the Krell will know exactly where we are weak. We need to destroy them before they can transmit. Negative, Cooper said, stepping up to the display. Let them look. Let them transmit. That is the whole point. The point. Corvin's voice rose several octaves. The point is to give the enemy complete intelligence on our fleet disposition. Exactly, Cooper said, grinning. See, here is the thing about the Krell. They are not stupid. Individually, each organism has the intelligence of a reasonably clever insect, but collectively, with their hive mind, they are actually quite smart enough to analyze data, recognize patterns, exploit weaknesses. He tapped a command into the holographic controls, and the display zoomed out to show the entire sector. The scattered coalition fleet positions were highlighted in blue. They are seeing exactly what we want them to see, Cooper continued. A panicked defensive force, split up and disorganized. Ships scattered across multiple systems with no clear tactical coherence. Fortuna itself is being evacuated, which tells them we have given up on defending it. From their perspective, we are in complete disarray. Admiral Corvin stared at the display, realization slowly dawning on his features. You want them to attack Fortuna? We want them to commit to attacking Fortuna, Cooper corrected. There is a difference. If they think it is a trap, they will probe carefully, send small forces, test our responses. But if they think we are broken, scared, running away, they will go all in. They will send everything they have, trying to overwhelm us before we can regroup. And when they do, I asked. Though I was beginning to understand, Cooper's grin widened. Then we introduced them to the concept of the ambush predator. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity, anticipation, and steadily mounting dread. The Krell scouts continued their reconnaissance, jumping in and out of systems, scanning our positions. We did nothing to stop them, following Cooper's instructions. And I could see it was driving my officers to distraction. Every tactical instinct we had was screaming at us to engage, to drive them off, to protect our intelligence. But we waited, and watched, and prepared. In hour 38, the main Krell swarm began to move. Our long-range sensors detected the massive fleet leaving the Talvik system, headed directly for Fortuna. The numbers were even worse than predicted. Not 800,000 vessels. 1.2 million. They were bringing nearly 30% of their total force. They are confident, Patterson observed from where he had joined us on the command deck. Good. Confidence makes you sloppy. At hour 42, the evacuation of Fortuna was declared complete. 8 billion souls had been moved to safety, crammed into transports and refugee ships, scattered across a dozen systems. It was the largest evacuation in recorded history, accomplished in less than 2 days, and somehow, impossibly, we had done it. The humans had been right. People could accomplish remarkable things when properly motivated. At hour 45, Colonel Patterson gave the order we had all been dreading. All coalition forces, this is TDI command. Execute Protocol Nightfall. I repeat, execute Protocol Nightfall. Throughout the sector, 2,000 coalition ships began to move. Not toward Fortuna, away from it. Running, fleeing before the approaching swarm. It went against every military doctrine, every warrior instinct, every code of honor that had been drilled into us since basic training. But we did it. Because the alternative was extinction. The Krell swarm accelerated, sensing prey in flight. Their fleet began to spread out, forming a massive net designed to catch and envelope the fleeing coalition forces. They were moving exactly as the humans had predicted, exactly as they had planned. At hour 47, the Krell fleet arrived at Fortuna. The empty planet hung in space like a jewel, its cities dark, its orbital platforms abandoned, its defense grid powered down, a prize waiting to be claimed. The Krell swarm surrounded it, their millions of vessels veving a living sphere around the world. And then they began to land. Thousands of ships, descending through the atmosphere, spreading across the continents, seeking the biomass they needed to sustain their endless hunger. They found nothing. Empty cities. Abandoned infrastructure. Not a single living thing larger than bacteria. On my command deck, every screen was showing telemetry from the stealth satellites we had positioned throughout the system. We watched as the Krell spread across Fortuna's surface, their confusion almost palpable even through the hive mind's alien intelligence. "They are realizing it is a trap," I whispered. "Too late," Patterson said calmly. He raised his hand, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Every being on the command deck held their breath, and then Patterson's hand fell and he spoke a single word: "Now." Space around Fortuna erupted. The coalition ships that had been fleeing suddenly reversed course, their engines flaring to maximum as they accelerated back toward the planet. But they were not attacking. They were positioning, forming a sphere around the Krell swarm, trapping them between the planet and the fleet. And then the real trap was sprung. From behind every major stellar body in the system, from within the asteroid belts, from behind the moons, from the shadows where they had been waiting in complete sensor silence, the human fleet emerged. I had known humanity had military vessels. Everyone knew that. But seeing the human fleet in its entirety, all at once, was like staring into the jaws of a nightmare. They were not like coalition ships. They were not sleek, elegant, designed with aesthetics in mind. They were brutal, angular, covered in weapons and armor plating. They looked like they had been designed by someone who had studied every predator in the galaxy and decided to build something worse. And there were so many of them. How many ships? Admiral Corvin whispered over the command channel, his voice filled with awe and terror. Cooper checked his datapad. At last count, about 46,000 combat vessels, give or take a few hundred. It is hard to keep exact numbers when you are building them as fast as we are. 46,000. Humanity had more warships than the entire coalition combined, and they had been hiding them. For years, decades, centuries perhaps. "Why?" I asked, the question bursting out of me. "Why hide this? Why not tell us? You could have been the dominant military power in the galaxy." Hayes, who had also appeared on my command deck at some point, looked at me with those tired eyes. "Because dominant military powers make everyone nervous, Commander. They start arms races, political tensions, eventually wars. We did not want to be a threat, we just wanted to be ready for when the real threats showed up." On the display, the human fleet was moving into position with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training. They were not rushing in. They were methodical, careful, positioning themselves with mathematical exactness around the Krell swarm. The Krell, realizing they were surrounded, began to react. Their ships lifted off from Fortuna's surface, reforming into combat formations. They were fast, adapting to the new situation within minutes. The hive mind was coordinating their response within human efficiency, but the humans were ready. "All coalition vessels, pull back to safe distance," Patterson ordered. "Maintain containment but do not engage. This is a human operation now." I wanted to protest. My ships were here, my crews were ready. We could help, we should help. But looking at the tactical display, at the way the human fleet was positioning itself, I realized something. We would just be in the way. The Krell struck first, launching millions of drone fighters at the human fleet. It was their standard opening move, overwhelming enemy point defenses through sheer numbers. The swarm of small craft filled space, blotting out the stars. The human response was instantaneous and terrifying. Every human ship opened fire at once, not with conventional weapons, with something else. Energy weapons that did not fire in straight lines but in branching fractal patterns like lightning. Each bolt split and split again, each fragment seeking a new target until a single shot had destroyed dozens of fighters. The space between the fleets turned into a web of death, crackling energy filling the void. Krell fighters died by the thousands, then the tens of thousands, then the hundreds of thousands, and the human ships had not even moved. What are those weapons? I breathed. Plasma arc casters, Cooper said casually, like he was discussing the weather. Based on technology we recovered from a dead civilization in the galactic core. Took us about 50 years to figure out how to make them work without melting the ships they were mounted on. They are very effective against swarm tactics. The Krell swarm adapted, pulling their fighters back and instead launching a coordinated assault with their larger vessels. Cruisers and battleships accelerated toward the human lines, firing biological weapons, acid projectors, viral torpedoes, everything in their horrifying arsenal. The human fleet opened up again, and this time I saw weapons I recognized. Railguns, missile batteries, plasma cannons. But they were firing in patterns, creating interlocking fields of fire that nothing could survive passing through. The Krell ships tried to push through anyway, driven by the hive mind's imperative to attack, to consume, to grow. They died in job lots, in waves, in numbers so vast that the tactical computer could not keep count fast enough. But they kept coming. That was the thing about the Krell. They did not care about casualties. Every ship destroyed was just biomass to be reclaimed later. They learned from every loss, adapted to every tactic, and they never ever stopped. The battle had been raging for 20 minutes when the Krell tried something new. A group of their largest dreadnoughts, vessels the size of small moons, suddenly activated some kind of FTL drive. Not to escape, to jump directly into the middle of the human formation. It should have worked. It was a brilliant tactic. Bypass the defensive line, appear among the enemy, cause chaos and destruction before they could react. But the Krell ships did not reappear among the human fleet. They reappeared exactly where they had been, as if they had never jumped at all. The massive dreadnoughts crashed into each other in their confusion, collision alarms blaring, hulls crumpling from the impacts. FTL interdiction field, Hayes explained, active across the entire system. Nothing jumps in or out without our permission. The Krell are locked in. They cannot run. They cannot call for reinforcements. They are alone. The realization of what the humans had done, what they had been planning all along, hit me like a physical blow. This was not a battle. This was an extermination. The humans had lured the Krell into a kill box, sealed all the exits, and now they were systematically destroying every single ship, and the Krell could do nothing but die. The battle continued for another 3 hours. The Krell tried every tactic in their arsenal. Kamikaze runs, biological weapons that could consume metal, EMP bursts, gravitational weapons. Nothing worked. The humans had a counter for everything, as if they had been studying the Krell for years and had prepared specifically for this fight, which, I realized, they probably had. By hour 4 the Krell fleet had been reduced by half. 600,000 ships destroyed. The biomass loss was so catastrophic that the hive mind should have ordered a retreat, but there was nowhere to retreat to. The FTL interdiction field kept them trapped. By hour 5, only 100,000 Krell vessels remained. They had stopped trying to attack and were instead clustering around their largest motherships, trying to protect the queen nodes that housed the hive mind's consciousness. By hour 6, it was over. The last Krell ship, a massive bioorganic dreadnought that had somehow survived the entire battle, made one final desperate charge at the human lines. It was destroyed by concentrated fire from 24 human ships, its hull rupturing, spilling organic matter and screaming organisms into the void. And then there was silence. The space around Fortuna was filled with debris, shattered hulls, frozen biomass, the remains of 1.2 million Krell vessels. It was the single largest military defeat in recorded history, and the human fleet was completely intact. Not a single ship lost. Not one. How? I asked, my voice barely working. How is that possible? Patterson looked at me, and for the first time since I had met him, his expression was not confident or cocky. He looked sad. Because we have been preparing for this for 500 years, Commander. Every battle we fought, every threat we faced, every monster we killed, we learned. We adapted. We improved. We built weapons that should not exist, developed tactics that no sane species would attempt, trained soldiers who do not know how to quit. We turned ourselves into the thing that nightmares have nightmares about, and we did it all in secret, in the shadows, so the rest of the galaxy could sleep peacefully. He turned back to the tactical display. The Krell made a mistake. They thought they were the apex predators. They thought they could just show up and consume everything without consequence. They were wrong. In this galaxy there is only one apex predator, and you have been living under our protection this entire time without even knowing it. The command channel came alive with transmissions from coalition ships. Cheers. Congratulations. Calls for celebration. We had won. Against impossible odds we had won. But I did not feel like celebrating. I felt small. Insignificant. Like a child who had just learned that the monsters under the bed were real, but so were the things that hunted the monsters. What happens now? Admiral Corvin asked quietly. Kais smiled, and this time it was a genuine smile. Warm, almost kind. Now we go back to work. There are still 4 million Krell ships out there in the Outer Rim. We have to deal with those too, and then there is the matter of the Veil Collective that is stirring in the Delta sector, and the reports of something eating stars in the galactic south. Always something that needs handling. She looked at all of us, her gaze sweeping across the assembled coalition representatives. But here is the thing. You asked us for backup. You thought we needed protection, and now you know the truth. We are not the backup. We never were. You were. Pedersen nodded. We have been fighting this war alone for centuries, keeping the galaxy safe while you built your civilizations and your cultures and your art. It was exhausting, thankless, and we were starting to burn out. But now you know what we can do, what we have been doing. And maybe, just maybe, you can start helping, really helping, not by hiding behind your defense platforms and hoping someone else deals with the problem, but by standing with us, fighting with us, being the backup we actually need. He extended his hand toward me, a human gesture I had learned meant respect and partnership. What do you say, Commander Threllick? Are you ready to stop playing at war and start actually fighting? Are you ready to see what the galaxy really looks like when someone pulls back the curtain? I looked at his hand for a long moment, thinking about everything I had learned, everything I had seen. The humans were terrifying, brutal, capable of violence on a scale that made me want to retreat to the spawning pools of my homeworld and hide. But they were also the reason my species still existed. The reason any of us still existed. And they were tired. So very tired. They had been carrying the weight of the galaxy alone for so long. It was time we helped them carry it. I reached out with my primary appendage and grasped his hand. The human custom felt strange, but also somehow right. We are ready, I said. Teach us. Show us how to fight the way you fight. And maybe together we can make this galaxy a safer place. Patterson's grin could have lit up a star. Now that, Commander, is exactly what I wanted to hear. Welcome to the real war. Try to keep up. And as I looked out at the human fleet, at those brutal, beautiful killing machines that had just saved us all, I realized something. The galaxy was a far more dangerous place than any of us had ever imagined, but it was also safer than we had ever known. Because humanity was out there, in the dark, in the shadows, fighting battles we would never hear about, defeating threats we would never see, standing between civilization and the monsters.